I'm very excited to introduce Sean Faircloth, who is the Executive Director for the Secular Coalition for America. We were very fortunate to hear Sean speak for the first time in his role as Executive Director last summer at our conference in Columbus, Ohio. We're very excited to have him back. He's been a great inspiration to our students. He's been a great inspiration, I think, to a lot of people in the area, and I'm not going to say anything more about him. I'm going to turn over the floor and let him take over.
Am I supposed to attach something to myself? I'm good? All right. Good. No, I really appreciate all that I've learned here, and I've learned a lot today. Where's Mr. LeClaire? Because I was just impressed with his remarks, and especially going on Fox News. Were you in high school or high school you were in? I was through, almost 10 years of legislative service before I went on Fox News. It was a unique experience for me. I mean, the Ronald limo took me to Fox News in New York, and then as soon as we go live on national TV, I was called a Stalinist and a Nazi within 60 seconds. I felt like I'd earned my stripes. So, if someone does it in high school, that's impressive stuff. Very, very good. And really, the standard that you really showed in terms of the nobility of your cause and the way you express it, and I saw you expressing it here today, was really something that impressed me very much. Although I do have to say that Greta's remarks really have stuck with me. Where did Greta go? There she is. Yes, because, well, in particular, living in Washington, D.C., when she made the comment about the Smithsonian exhibit of the perfect bisexual. I've been spending the last couple hours trying to picture this. We could have our own James Dean for some. I don't know. It's an interesting thought. We'll have to contemplate that. But the thing that I want to disagree slightly with her about, she said that women are as oppressed as much as men by theology, but actually I'd say it's been even more so. If we look at history, that unfortunately too many times, though I have many friends who are religious and reach out to religious folks, that too many times religion has been a tool of oppression of women for centuries upon centuries. It's just something we need to look in the eye. And we've been talking today. We've been talking today about the diversity of our coalition. And on January 10th at Secular Coalition for America's board meeting, we made some decisions about where we're headed in the future. And one of the things is to cultivate diversity in leadership for our organizations. And thank you, August, who voted for that as the secretary and is on our board. Because what we're going to do is lead into the future. I can't help with every single local organization. That's to each on their own to accomplish that. But I think Secular Coalition for America, our primary mission is always lobbying, but our additional mission is coalition. And that we help, and we have a specific plan to get out there and reach out so that more women are not simply involved, but taking board leadership roles. More people of color involved, taking board leadership roles. More people who are gay are out there taking board leadership roles, and that we specifically execute that plan. And I tell you that when I make a commitment as the executive director of this organization to that plan, I intend to do what an executive director does and execute that plan. And you will see that over this decade, that our movement will become increasingly diverse because of our values. And so I want to make that commitment to all of you that that's where Secular Coalition for America is coming from. But I have, as Liz mentioned, I'm still new to the job, and so I get great satisfaction in the learning experience that I'm having in this position and traveling around the United States as I do. And probably, some of the biggest learning experiences have been mentioned. Mr. LeClaire was talking about, his teacher there in New Jersey. And for me, I don't know what he's complaining about because I went to the Creation Museum. And it says there right on the plaque that the dinosaurs came on, because they were baby dinosaurs, onto the ark. It says it. It's there. It's on a good document, so we know it's true. I've learned so much. I went down to Louisiana for another learning experience because I'm from Bangor, Maine. I represented Bangor in the legislature for 10 years. And, we have Stephen King, who, some people think is kind of spooky because he writes about demons. But in Louisiana, they have Governor Jindal, who specifically says he believes in demons. Now, that to me is slightly scary. And they have Senator Vitter, from Louisiana. Senator Vitto, he's one of my favorites. I mean, some people know him because around the corner from my office is the Mayflower Hotel, where while he's lecturing us about the morality of our sex lives, he's having sex with prostitutes at the Mayflower around from my office. You know, I'm not judging that. That doesn't matter so much to me. But what I do question, I guess, is when Senator Vitter, he said that opposing gay marriage was so important. He said this is so critically important that it'd be more important than if they faced Katrina and Rita together down in Louisiana. I mean, I'm thinking Louisiana, hurricanes are kind of important down there. But not according to Senator Vitter. And also, Katrina and Rita, it's two women getting together. That could be that could be a really bad thing. You know, that's something we should be concerned about. He serves in the United States Congress. You know, in Illinois, we have Representative Shimkus. Everybody know Representative Shimkus? You should. He's one of 535 people who serve in the United States Congress. And they had the debate this last year on global warming. Representative Shimkus said this. He said, just check out the Bible. The Bible says that when you have the flood, that God promised that there'd only be one flood. And therefore, all this stuff about the oceans rising, don't worry about that. It's in the Bible, no flood. He also said, and I'm quoting him as well here, he said there's an important theological debate about whether we're producing enough carbon. Now, some of you biblical scholars can tell me what that passage is. Is there like a carbon passage? I don't know. I don't know where he got it, but he said it. He said it in open debate in the United States Congress. And of course, you know, the golden state of California, we have Wally Herger. Representative Wally Herger, probably a lot of you have never even heard, but he is a U.S. representative from California. And when one of his constituents came up to him and said, and I'm quoting the constituent, "I am a proud right-wing terrorist," Representative Herger replied, quote, "Amen, quote, God bless you. There goes a great America." This is one of 535 people. There are 300 million people in the United States of America. And I've been quoting from people who are among the 535 that make decisions for this nation. So don't say that I don't wake up in the morning with some challenges, okay? My job as lobbyist for secular coalition for America. And I'm going to be talking about these public policy issues. But I first want to talk about the Bible because I know nothing about it. What I know about the Bible, I learned from the children's Bible. I'd go on summer vacation, fight with my sister in the backseat of the car, and I was going to read the children's Bible, all right? And I remember we're driving across the desert, even though I was in the legislature in Maine, I grew up in Southern California, we're driving across Utah or someplace, so it feels biblical. And we're out there driving across the desert, and I'm getting to the part in the Bible. My dad's up there driving, you know, my mom, and he's in the driver's seat of the car, and I get to the passage where it says, you know, that God instructs Abraham to kill his son. And they say this is a good thing. That's in the, you know, that he's a God-fearing man. That's a positive. I'm looking at my dad there and thinking, I hope he's not too God-fearing. Nerve-wracking from my perspective. But it was the first time in my life where I had that pause moment about something that everybody accepts, the Bible. And it raised questions. Where I said to myself, well, would it be a moral person who would obey an order to kill their child? Would it be a moral God who, even as a test for you biblical scholars, would tell someone to kill their child? And then third, what kind of morality would it be where we view children as property that you can use in some form of religious sacrifice? But remember, this is a story. It's a legend from a very famous book. Compare this story to something in real life that happened in the United States of America in this century, the 21st century. There was a girl named Amia White. Amia White was 2 years old. And Amia went to child care, as do most children in the United States today at that age. And at the child care, they lost track of her. And she was left alone, trapped in a van in the sun in Alabama for 2 hours. And little Amia White's heart gave out, and she died alone in that van. And on the outside of that van were painted the words, Holy Church. Because you see, in the state of Alabama, they have exemption laws for childcare, for religious childcare. So picture two childcares side by side. One childcare is the secular childcare. The secular childcare has to obey health and safety laws, medication segregation laws, food safety laws. They have unannounced state inspections. All these regulations apply to the secular child care. Right next door is a religious child care. None of those regulations apply to the religious child care. And by the way, these are your tax dollars at work. Yes, I said Alabama, but 1/4 of the children in these child cares, including the religious child cares, receive the federal low-income subsidy. So it's your tax dollars that are going to Alabama to a religious child care that doesn't even need to obey the laws of their own state. But you don't need to worry, because the head of the Alabama Christian Coalition said, the pastors and the congregations are our quality control. Don't worry about it. But, and you know, there are anomalous situations. There can be freak accidents. Things can happen. However, there was a boy named Demyron Lindley. He was 3 years old, and he was left alone in the sun in a van owned by a religious child care in Alabama for 10 hours. And after 10 hours in the sun, he died alone in that van. Now, it's much more common for children to be neglected, left alone in their own feces for hours on end. Children who are in situations where not the most basic standards for child cares are met in that society. How can that happen in this country? Because politicians decide that they will let it happen, and it happens all over. It happens in the state of Maine, which is not a religious-dominated state. We have specific exemptions in state law in Maine that say, well, if you say you're religious, then you can send your child to small child cares without their vaccination, even if that will endanger, of course, that child, but also the other children with whom they come in contact. But that's the law in the state of Maine. There's over 30 states that have some form of this type of exemption, and about 15 states that have these broad exemptions for child cares that endanger children around this country. I want to tell you another story, an ancient story, but this one's true, from the Incas. The Incas had a ritual where they would take children and they would take them up to the mountains, and they would drug them, they would inebriate them first, and then they would kill them as a sacrifice to their gods. But they did drug them to have them feel less pain, and they did kill them quickly. Compare that to what happened again in the 20th century in the 21st century, in the United States of America. In Tennessee, there was a girl named Jessica Crank, and she had a tumor that started to grow on her shoulder. And she had a type of tumor that was easily treatable with modern medical science. It wasn't some rare disease that couldn't be cured. It was something that was perfectly curable. But her mother did not believe in modern medical science. Her mother believed in the Epistle of James and pointed to that for treatment of her child. And so the tumor grew and grew and grew until it was literally, not figuratively, literally the size of a basketball on this girl's shoulder. She was in horrible, agonizing pain for weeks on end, and then she died. It was torture. Some of us here in this room, I bet, protested against torture at Abu Ghraib. Think about the torture that this girl experienced. Think about how common this situation is, especially with small children. They did an infant mortality study with the Faith Assembly congregation, which follows so-called exclusive faith healing. The infant mortality rate, we're talking 0 to 6 months old, little tiny children. The infant mortality rate was 270% higher than the general population. And a lot of these deaths we don't even hear about. You know, Sarah Palin was telling us, this last summer about death panels. These are real death panels, where 1 or 2 people can decide the death of another human being, to take away the life, the human rights of another human being. Where are the right to life groups on this? Where are they on this issue? And where are we in this room? We're having our meetings. Very important to have all of our meetings. Very important for us to debate issues of whether we should be aggressive on atheism or not aggressive or compromise all those issues. We have a moral responsibility, and I use the word moral advisedly, because the word moral does not have to do with your genitals. The word moral has more important meaning. And that moral meaning means that we have to get up off these seats and take action regarding these issues. That's what it's about. That's what our moral obligation is in our society. And we in this room, are not doing enough. We have to take more action. I want to give you a third basis of religiously based child abuse, one that's more commonly discussed. Some of you may be familiar with Father Paul Shanley. He's from the New England area. Father Shanley would attend the Man-Boy Love Association meetings, something he liked to do. And I will go out on a limb here and say I think that's a bad thing. That's me. I'm not for that kind of thing. But there's something more systemic that's an issue here, is that Father Shanley's boss, his boss, Bishop Daly, knew that his employee was attending the Man-Boy Love Association meetings while the bishop was transferring him from Parish A to Parish B to Parish C. You know, I started a children's museum in the state of Maine. I had employees who had access to children all the time, and luckily nothing unfortunate ever happened, and things can happen. But if I was ever in a situation where we were in litigation, we would have to respond to discovery and provide information about that employee, as we should. But you know what the Catholic Church says? It is their stated policy that as a freedom under the First Amendment, under the free expression clause of the Constitution, it's their argument, that they can keep secret their internal employee decisions about where they transfer their priests from Parish A to Parish B to Parish C. And they say this, think about this, they say this simultaneous with other stands. For me, the striking one was this last year in the state of Maine, in my home state, where they were taking this position very aggressively with their attorneys in court on these kinds of questions, where they were also talking about other moral issues. Now, there are lots of moral issues in my mind. There's Darfur, there's starvation throughout the world. But the one moral issue that they were handing out flyers about from the churches in the state of Maine was, of course, against gay marriage. That was the moral issue. So simultaneously, as they're trying to keep secret their internal employment decisions about people who are a danger to children, they're saying the one moral issue we'll take a bold public stand on is against gay marriage. As someone who went to the University of Notre Dame, who has friends who are priests, that doesn't add for me. It doesn't work for me on a basis of morality. All these situations of religiously based child abuse will be couched to you. You'll hear it. They'll say, oh, that's the First Amendment. That's the free expression clause of the Constitution of the United States of America. Wrong. If they tell you that, respectfully, wrong. It's not true. The 1943 case of the United States Supreme Court made very clear in Prince versus Massachusetts that placing children in a situation of ill health or death is not something, of course, that's protected by the Constitution's free expression clause. It has nothing to do with any constitutional right, even under the Justice Roberts Court, at least for now. That's the situation that we're in. So how did we get here? John Witt of the Center for Study of Separation of Church and State says that separation of church and state is no longer the law of the land in the United States of America today. You know, we'll hear Rush Limbaugh, won't we? We'll hear him talk about special rights, especially in connection with things like affirmative action. But you know what I think is really special rights? Is elevating one class of people over another class of people and giving them privileges on the basis of religion. That is special rights, and that is immoral. And I think we need to stand up against it. We need to speak out, and we need to take action. You know, for me, a very central part of my own personal commitment to this comes from when I was in high school. I tried out for a play some of you may know called Inherit the Wind, about the Scopes monkey trials back in the 1920s. And I worked hard, and I got to play the Clarence Darrow part in that play. It was fun. It definitely affects your worldview when you memorize Clarence Darrow's trial testimony from that case. But what's relevant here is that that play was written in the 1950s, and it was looking back on the 1920s. And you can tell by the whole tone, the way the play was written, it was saying, hey, those bad old days. We're moving on to the upwards of separation of church and state. We're moving on to a secular America with a great set of First Amendment values. That's not going to be the way it is anymore, aren't we glad? But something went wrong on the way to the 21st century, didn't it? And how did we get here? I think part of it has to do with church power. And I'm very cognizant that certainly there was a lot of church power back in the mid-20th century, no denying that. But there's a qualitative difference. There's a qualitative difference in recent decades in the power of the church. And it has to do with these mega churches. It has to do with the rise of evangelical churches. It has to do with the type of church that has not just the soup kitchen over, off to the side, but has the ice cream parlor and the fitness center. It has the broadcasting facility, often a multi-million-dollar broadcasting facility, and huge millions of dollars of lobbying operations in Washington, D.C. We just came to exist, the Secular Coalition, a few short years ago. They've had elaborate lobbying efforts to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars for decades now. That's the situation we're facing, and it is very different. So when Rush Limbaugh talks about affirmative action, special rights, I say that the real special rights are in the other direction. And that people like Billy Graham who, when the Nixon tapes were recently released, and he was referring to the synagogues of Satan, his son, who now runs a charitable organization that gets money from the federal government, and where they said that they were going to connect earthquake relief funding with you attending evangelical ceremonies, with the recipients going to evangelical ceremonies, your tax dollars at work, that is what you call special rights. And unfortunately, they have special rights in America today. Rick Warren and his huge multi-million-dollar organization. Rick Warren, who compared Terry Schiavo's husband to a Nazi. That Rick Warren and his organization did special rights in our society. Of course, everybody remembers Ted Haggard. Ted Haggard, who would lecture us against gay sex while having gay sex on meth. That Ted Haggard. But the sex overshadows the real meaning. The real meaning is the hundreds of millions of dollars that organization still controls and still affects public policy out of Colorado Springs today. That's the real issue. They have special rights in our society, so much so that even we who are of secular mind don't even notice it on a lot of occasions. I mean, think about this power. This is a power that's including in the progressive states that have anti-discrimination laws. This is something they can do within their organizations. They can say, you are a Jew, you are fired. They can say, you are agnostic, you are fired. You are atheist, you are fired. There are specific exemptions within the anti-discrimination laws to allow them that power within their organizations. Now that's some power. Let me give you some more power. The federal politicians passed a law in 1991 that affects land use planning. And in the Boulder County in Colorado, they passed a land use planning law. And the evangelical church there said, well, we don't want to obey that land use planning law. We say that it's our religious freedom right, not under the Constitution, but under this law passed by politicians, to allow us to ignore that statute. And they succeeded in court. Now, every for-profit business, they have to obey the law. Any secular nonprofit, they have to obey that law. But no, not the fundamentalist organizations. It is in this situation, it is in this time that we got to help people like ours. And help his organization and be involved with the secular movement and be involved with Secular Coalition for America. I'm proud that Secular Student Alliance is one of our best of our 10-member organizations. But you need the Secular Coalition to be speaking out on these questions. And it is absolutely pivotal in a time when a lot of good people, including a lot of good religious people, are not speaking out. And when we were talking today, I heard people talking today, and I was listening carefully to what people said. And people were saying, how do we get more people to come to our meetings? How do we diversify our organizations? How do we keep our organizations from sometimes, as they do, devolving into the debates about, should we fight about the name, whether it's agnostic or atheist, or should we say, are we going to be aggressive or not be aggressive? I just want people to be doing something at all on behalf of public policy. That's what I want to see. And we have a plan at Secular Coalition on January 10th this year. The Secular Coalition for America's board, and thank you to August for voting for this plan. We are at a place now where we are moving forward, and we have a 50-state strategy. As we are the Secular Coalition for America, by the end of this decade, there will be a Secular Coalition for Oregon. There'll be a Secular Coalition for California. People will be coming together to speak out on public policy issues, both to their state capital and to their federal legislators, so that we are a true force in American public policy. We're not there now. We're not there now. But what we did on January 10th at Secular Coalition's board meeting, I think sets us on the way. We've had tremendous progress in this last decade, but I think this next decade is going to be even better. We're going to take our place at the table involving American public policy. And that is the joyousness of the action. People were talking about being the happy atheist and those kinds of things, which I thought was a tremendous presentation. Well, to me, the biggest happiness that you can have, the biggest happiness you can have in life, is to say, I did something for my fellow citizen. Someone else said today, well, we atheists, we're not being dragged behind a truck, or, that's true. It's true. But when it was Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman, there were people there who were not directly affected, but they were willing to give their life to that cause, even though they were not directly affected. And when we talk about these children who are in these situations, these children in these faith healing homes, they're religious fundamentalists themselves. We don't care. We non-theists don't care about that because our justice includes every single person. That's what we are. That's our values. And so if it helps somebody else and doesn't help us specifically, tremendous. And also tremendous strategically because it shows who we are. We're not the angry atheists. We are the compassionate fighters for justice. And that's what we're going to show ourselves in this coming decade. But right now we got some challenges. And I want to kind of go through a mind experiment, if you will, to demonstrate where we are. And I want everybody in this room to pretend we're political consultants. And we're going to help our candidate for office. And let's see here. Young woman in the back, you'll be our candidate. You're running for the United States Congress. Wave, smile, pretty. You know, very good, excellent. Now, what's the first thing we're going to do to help our candidate? We're going to look for some dirt. We call it opposition research. You know, because maybe you've got a little Edwards thing going on. Just want to know, you know, because we want to help. We're here to help you as political consultants, and we want to find out any little skeletons so that the other side doesn't, you know, find out about this stuff. So I'm only thinking of your best interest when I go through this process, all right? And that'll be $10,000. So what I want to do is, we found our candidate. She looks nice. She smiles nice. Good, fine. But we found some things you said. And we're going to just quote them back to you. Quote number 1, the clergy dreads the advance of science as witches do the approach of daylight. No. Quote number 2 from you, religions are all alike, founded upon fables and mythologies. Sounds kind of bitter atheist to me. Quote number 3, Christianity is our particular superstition. Angry atheist. No. See, what in the real world would we say in 2010 about a candidate who had those kind of quotes in their background? I think unfortunately we'd have to say, good luck, kid. Thanks for coming in. Leave that $10,000 check on the door. Really appreciate it. But sorry, candidate Thomas Jefferson, you look better than Thomas Jefferson. You're not as tall, but yeah. But those are all quotes from Thomas Jefferson, and we've got to say to Tom Jefferson, you know, maybe go into accounting or something. You know, pick some other kind of a career. So here he is, the guy that most people think was probably the smartest president ever. Certainly one of our greatest presidents. And the guy who wrote the Declaration of Independence would be denied us because he dared to think independently. That's where we are. That's where we are in America today. That some guy who's been dead a really long time and wore a powdered wig is more modern than we are. That's the situation we're in now. And we've got to change it. And part of the way we got here was in 1984 at the Republican convention. I'm going to quote to you from the prayer, of course, that opened the convention. They had thousands of people in the convention, all millions watching on TV. And the minister said, and I quote, "There is no such thing as the separation of church and state. It is merely a figment of the imagination of infidels." They meant Thomas Jefferson, infidel, since that was from him. Consider this quote. "In no instance have the churches been the guardians of the liberties of the people." James Madison, the father of our Constitution. Thomas Jefferson, and I always think he gets the good press this time. He was tall and he was handsome. The women kind of dug him. James Madison, short, kind of overweight, you know, that sort of thing. But James Madison was really the one who was so strong on this. I mean, Thomas Jefferson said separation of church and state. James Madison said, and I'm quoting, total separation of church and state. Those are the values of James Madison. And he should know, he was the father of our Constitution. And so we get in this situation where President Obama, you know, he'll maybe not make as big a deal about the National Prayer Breakfast as did his predecessor in office. James Madison opposed the existence of national days of prayer. Didn't think they were a good idea. That's the father of the Constitution. The Secular Coalition for America right now, today, is lobbying so that chaplains in the U.S. military don't proselytize, right? James Madison opposed the existence of chaplains because he said they would lead to majority tyranny. That's where James Madison was coming from. The Secular Coalition for America in the 21st century today is now lobbying because we say, geez, you know, you shouldn't fund faith-based initiatives, especially when they proselytize and discriminate. shouldn't give our tax dollars to those situations. We're working on that now. James Madison said, even when there wasn't one penny, not one penny of tax dollars involved, James Madison said, if it involved giving to a church some form of governmental function, don't do it. It's too much of an intermingling between church and state. That was the position of James Madison. Those were the views of Thomas Jefferson. But when I was on talk radio in Iowa some months ago, they said, well, those are just, quote, two guys. Okay? So I took another word, so I'll go back, I'll go through the list here. And so I said, let's go to Adams, who was the most Christian of our early presidents. And here's what Adams said. He said the United States was founded on the natural authority of the people alone, without a pretense of miracle or mystery, and that was a great point gained in the favor of the rights of man. And as many of you know, he was the one who signed the treaty that was unanimously approved by the Senate, approved by his Secretary of State, that said the United States government is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. Not in any sense, fairly clear. And that language was approved by his predecessor, George Washington. So Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, these were thinkers. They were thinkers of the 1700s Enlightenment. These were the kind of leaders that we had. And we've had leaders like that since. One of them, who went to Mass every Sunday, was Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy, probably after Madison, was the most clear on separation of church and state. He said things like this, that every man has the right to attend or not attend the church of his choice, and that no church or church school is granted any public funds or political preference. No church school granted any public funds. Compare that to policies we've seen in recent decades. My big example is the Golden Christian School in Cleveland, Ohio. The Golden Christian School had a curriculum with your tax dollars that existed solely of watching videotapes. That was their curriculum, funded by you. So for me, the answer is pretty clear. It is Jack Kennedy's answer. No government funding for religious schools, period. But I also think it's very true and right that we should read the Bible, and we should read it in taxpayer-funded schools. No doubt, it's a good thing. We should read the Quran in our taxpayer-funded schools, no doubt, and we should read the Constitution of the United States of America, and then think, which of these documents evolves? Which of these documents is willing to bend and change? And which documents evoke viciousness and violence and vindictiveness? We need to have America made safe for the ideas of people like Einstein, Twain, and politics to be made safe for the ideas of Jefferson and Madison. We need to follow the golden rule. The golden rule for me is the Constitution, which is particularly Article 6, Section 3. Federal officials shall be bound to support the Constitution, but no religious text shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under these United States. Because to me, the beauty of the Constitution was that it was designed based on a theory of evolution. You know, the Bible and the Quran, they reject evolution, and not just in a scientific sense. They reject evolution in a humanistic sense. No matter what new we learn, no matter what new compassion that we gain, those documents are etched in stone. They stay the same. That can't be the way it is. And what Madison envisioned was a document, a mechanism that bends human interactions toward greater inclusion and greater justice for all. Just as Einstein showed that light bends, Madison showed that the light of justice bends, and it's bending in the right direction, I'm optimistic to say, and this one is evidence of it. The data shows that about 7% of those Americans who are 65 and older express a non-theistic worldview. For people who are 30 and under, it's almost 4 times as many Americans who express that worldview. Things are headed in that direction. It's true that the religious right has many millions of dollars at their disposal. There's no question about it. But we have justice and we have the trends on our side. But we need leadership from you. We need you to have every single person in this room not only sign up for the action alerts at secular.org, but to tell 10 friends to sign up for the action alerts at secular.org, and to be directly involved in action that changes our society. I hope that when we get to the end of this decade, that you'll see that each one in this room has become someone who's taken a leadership role. That we have people of great experience, people who are 60, 70, 80, and 90 years old, because I'm not ageist, who are involved in leadership in our organizations. But much more so, we see people in this room who are also involved in taking leadership in this next 10 years, and that somebody in this room, maybe more than one of the people in this room, make a decision that they're going to run for the city council, they're going to run for the state legislature, and they're going to be elected to Congress. And you work your way bit by bit to achieve that level of success. I think that we can do that, and I think we can do that before this decade is out. Secular Coalition for America has the plan that will bring all the groups together to get us there. And I hope that every one of you will stay actively involved, not only as students, which is a fantastic organization, a fantastic step forward, but stay involved as alumni to change the face of America to what I think is its great secular heritage. So I thank you for hearing me out. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I know you're all going to get those action alerts and sign up 10 other people for it.
I was just curious, as President Obama is trying to reform, if not in some cases eliminate, some of Bush's faith-based initiatives, what the Secular Coalition for America is doing, and what kind of opposition you guys are facing from religious lobby groups trying to keep them in place, if not make them stronger.
Well, it's going to be a tough fight. That was a close vote. It was a one-vote margin within the advisory panel. So we don't know how it's going to go, and I imagine it will be a tough issue. One thing that we did, and I felt it was important, I signed off on the release yesterday, the day before on it, was that we're thanking President Obama for, one, he is the first president who's really spoken out about non-theistic Americans in his inaugural, as he did in Cairo. Those are positive and meaningful steps. It took him some time in terms of where the recommendation of the Faith-Based Council is. Now, that doesn't mean he has yet signed the executive order. So we're going to be speaking out to say that he should follow through on his pledge of July 1 of 2008 in Zanesville, Ohio, where he said there shall be no discrimination and no proselytizing by faith-based taxpayer-funded initiatives. We'll coalesce and work with other organizations to achieve that goal. I'd be sugarcoating it to say that that's going to be an easy fight, and I don't even know, to be honest, where the president is on it. I do know that we are advocating. We've had our job nicely doubled in the last year because we have been, since 2005, 2006, lobbying the United States Congress. But now, I mean, as you might imagine, it wasn't a particularly good use of our time to try to lobby the Bush administration. But now we have a whole new branch of government where they are open, they are talking. We've had meetings, we talked to them. I went to meetings about the Safe Schools Initiative. We talked about situations where in public schools, and thanks to Amanda Mescus from Camp Quest for providing us for some of the significant unfortunate situations where kids are mistreated because of non-theistic views. So we're able to lobby the executive branch and actually feel like we're getting a hearing. I don't know where it's going to go on that issue, but we'll be there full force. And we work in alliance with other organizations. I will tell you that, you know, this is always a team effort. Everything is a team effort. And we work with Interfaith Alliance, which is, you know, a religious progressive organization. We work with Americans United, and we'll be out there swinging on this issue, and I don't know how to win that. Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks for your talk. I wanted to commend especially and applaud your campaign against religious medical neglect of children. But I want to challenge your assertion that separation of church and state is a dead letter in the United States of America. You mentioned the kind of premature obituary in this 1984 prayer.
Yep.
Of course, 1984 is the same year that Lynch v. Donnelly was decided, and Sandra Day O'Connor gave us the endorsement test, which is quite strong and quite clear. Added with the Lemon test, these, as far as I know, are still a part of our case law. So isn't it less alarming but more accurate to say that over the last 20, 30 years there's been a dramatic resurgence, a return of evangelical Christians to public life, but that the law of the United States is firmly on our side?
The law of the Constitution is firmly on our side, and a number of Supreme Court rulings are firmly on our side. You're correct. And actually, that wasn't my quote. That was John Witt from the Emory University Center for Separation of Church and State. And I think you're right that you are perhaps more optimistic, and indeed I am more underscores a problem that I think even we don't recognize enough. I think sometimes we look to the courts, and I'm a lawyer, and happy when that's the right path, to follow a litigation path. But I think we, particularly in the secular movement, have to a large degree neglected the state legislatures and what happens in the United States Congress. And that a lot of times laws like, you just referenced the issue of medical neglect of children, and a lot of laws passed that at least now a lot of courts would uphold, I think incorrectly, and where proper place to engage, if you will, is to go to the Congress and to go to the legislatures and carry the fight. And so we certainly have a lot of allies in terms of ACLU and others who litigate on behalf of our issues. A challenge we face, I'll say, when we litigate, and I feel like sometimes we're not as strategic as maybe we should be, is I feel like when you pick a lawsuit, you should pick a lawsuit where you're going to win. Even I know on principle we're right on many issues, but a lot of times the judge is someone appointed by the type of president where they're going to rule against us. And so I think we need to be strategic in terms of our litigation strategy. So I guess in a nutshell, I think you're right to be more optimistic than that quote. I'm more optimistic than that quote. But I also think it underscores that we need to engage more in the political process. And if I can just expand on that a little bit, I feel like it's right morally or ethically, whatever we want to phrase it, in terms of doing the right thing for our fellow citizens to engage in some of these public policy issues I've named. But I also think it's really right strategically for us when people are saying, how can we get people to work together within our movement? Here's something we can work together on. I will watch non-theists debate hours on end about shouldn't be atheist, agnostic, or how should we phrase it, blah, blah, blah. But when I say, should they allow for some parent to let their kid die of a horrible tumor? The answer is no. And we're ready to work 100% together. And I think it's a tremendous bonding and unifying force for our movement to take on public policy issues. So that when we're having fun and engaging in kind of community activities, let's go to the state capitol in Salem, Oregon, and change those laws. Let's get active on